And obviously Jack Kevorkian pioneered this, right? And he subsequently was incarcerated for his contributions, but he knew well that there is a merciful, and I'm not a proponent either way. I'm an academic, so I just want to present the information. I'm not going to lie, but I do have some type of philosophical tendency to support a view that says, look, I'm going to minimize trauma, I'm going to minimize pain, and if active euthanasia is going to do that, then fine. The problem, however, is that with respect to active euthanasia, so these are some of the cons, right? Some of the cons with active euthanasia, however, the first big con is that if we say that active euthanasia is now law, it's now policy, medical providers have to assist in the taking of human beings' lives under a certain set of criteria, then we force responsibility for active euthanasia on members of the medical community. So that's the first drawback. So though it may seem as though it's better than passive euthanasia, insofar as that death is expedited and suffering is minimized, the one drawback, the one disadvantage, the one disadvantage that you have is that it forces responsibility on members of the medical community. Members of the medical community. Right? So it forces responsibility on members of the medical community. I'm a doctor, I'm an MD, I'm a physician, and I go and I go into work one day and they say, hey, Jason, guess what? Mary's here. Here's the circumstances. It's really bad. It's not looking good. You're going to be the one to go in there and take Mary's life. That's a huge responsibility, right? That's an enormous responsibility to give to an individual. There are people in our society that fulfill that responsibility. Obviously, there are people, and we do have criteria in which individuals are charged with the responsibility of taking other people's lives. We support capital punishment as a nation in the United States, and obviously someone has to carry out the act of capital punishment. So it's not like this doesn't already exist. This already exists. This responsibility already exists, and there certainly would be individuals within the community that wouldn't have a problem facilitating individuals with their requests. So that way it might not be forced as much. But it's a huge burden to offer or to mandate that someone in the medical community has to accept, right? One of you in the medical community, one of you doctors, one of you nurses are going to have to contribute in actively killing this person because they fit some set of standards, right? So that's the first huge disadvantage to active euthanasia. With respect to passive euthanasia, well, the disadvantage that I discussed earlier was apparent, right? The main disadvantage of passive euthanasia is that death isn't expedited, right? It's not a swift process, right? That death sometimes unfolds and occurs, or dying, and I'll talk about this in another video, dying unfolds gradually, right? So that the process of dying is a slow process, right? The process of dying is a very slow and painful, sometimes, process. So the process of dying is a slow process. Obviously, there are times when you can die really fast. I understand that you can have pulmonary embolism or you can hemorrhage. You can die within a matter of minutes, certainly. I mean, that's rather apparent. The point is, though, that for individuals at the end of life in medical hospitals or in hospice, these individuals sometimes, the act of actually dying and ultimately resulting in death can, for many people, just be too long of a process. It can be too slow of a process. It can cause too much pain for their loved ones watching someone deteriorate, right? So that the process is too slow, and that's why active euthanasia might be a viable alternative. So for this, I'm going to present both the cons, the description and the pros for each of these, but also the disadvantages to each. Alright, the next is known as voluntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia is patient requested. Voluntary euthanasia is patient requested euthanasia, right? Patient requested euthanasia. And it's basically the story of Jack Kevorkian, though there's many other instances, right? The patient seeks out a member of the, which now would be illegal. You can't do this, right? But patient requested euthanasia is where two stances, and I'm not going to get into too much detail on this. First stance is where the patient seeks out a member of the medical community to facilitate in the act of euthanizing the individual, myself, right? Kevorkian was a perfect example. People came to Kevorkian and asked him, please, as a medical doctor, help me in taking my own life, obviously painlessly, right? The fact that the individual of his or her own free will volunteered to be euthanized is known as voluntary euthanasia. Usually when voluntary euthanasia happens, however, it's not requested at, the request isn't made to a medical care provider. This happens hundreds of times throughout the year, I'm sure. I don't know the specific statistics. I read the statistics years ago. But it happens many, many times. And what usually happens in voluntary euthanasia is that it's typically a spouse that asks another member, the other spouse, hey, sweetheart, you know, I can't take it anymore. The pain's too much. Can you take my life? And however the spouse decides to take the person's life, they come up with an arrangement of how it's going to work. This happens, right? So that typically when voluntary euthanasia unfolds, it's usually at the suggestion or the request for euthanasia is given to a family member or a loved one or a spouse, something like that. Obviously, members of the medical community cannot request or acknowledge, fulfill requests for active euthanasia because active euthanasia is illegal in the U.S., with the exception, I think, of one state. Maybe, maybe not. And if you know the answer to that, please put it in the comment, because I don't know if it still is the case. I want to say it's Oregon, but I'm not sure. Okay. What's the disadvantage, however, to voluntary euthanasia? Well, the main disadvantage to voluntary euthanasia is the assumption that all patients are rational, right? The main disadvantage, though you always want to give primacy, you always want to sort of give credence to individuals' requests, right? You want to give credence to an individual's sort of right to determine self-determination. Not all agents, not all people are rational. As a matter of fact, far more people are irrational than rational, right? So that the biggest drawback, the biggest problem with voluntary euthanasia is that it assumes the rationality of all patients, right? So it assumes the rationality, of patients. Right? So it assumes the rationality of patients. It makes the assumption that, hey, patients have an ability to make well-informed, logical, fully thought-out decisions regarding their end-of-life care. And since they have the ability to make well-informed decisions about their end-of-life care, someone, should acknowledge or fulfill their request to be euthanized. The problem is, however, is that a lot of people don't make rational decisions about how they're going to live their life, much less end their life. And then if we are presented in a situation where you have an irrational request, you know, I want to end my life because well, seemingly irrational. I'm not trying to, you know, trivialize anyone's experience, because I know this can be very, I mean, I've had friends who've killed themselves, right? I've had a number of friends who've killed themselves, right? For exactly these reasons. You know, my girlfriend left me, right? It sounds so cliche, but my girlfriend left me. I'm willing to die. Can you kill me? Well, though that request might be rooted in very deep emotion, the argument against it will be that there isn't much logic to that.